There we go. All right, let's make sure everybody's in the right session. This is called the advanced software session. The main point is we're going to keep this pretty interactive. So please ask questions along the way. A couple of the main things we're going to try to achieve is I'm just going to walk step by step through a couple of the new features that have already been talked about today, but the team wanted you guys to see exactly how they work. Very similar to some webinars we've done in the past, but kind of go through more detail on some of these advanced features. And then at the end, we'll kind of open it up to questions. And if you guys have anything specific, we can load into the software and dive into any specific questions you may not know how to do or may have questions about within the software itself. So the first thing we're going to cover is machine data. Again, even though this was released last year, there's still very, very few people using it. So we'll walk through on how you can use machine data, but first off, how it works. How do we get machine data into the system? So just like a lot of the new things up in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to hit that main drop down, and you're going to see two things that are important in regards to machine data. One's partner connections, and then the second is the machine data. And we're going to start with partner connections to start with. You'll see a list of our current available partner connections today. The one we're going to focus on is John Deere Operations. The other one's Field View specifically. That is primarily just to bring in your farm fields and boundaries to get new growers set up. But with John Deere Operations Center, it's going to sync all your machinery data that has been recorded or documented in John Deere Operations Center. So this is it's a real simple process. If you have growers interested in this, don't be afraid of the setup because it's a 2 or 3 step, very simple process. You're simply going to enter in your CropX username and account. It's going to more or less sync you over and open up John Deere Operations Center with a single sign-on, ask you to sign into Operations Center, and from there, it automatically creates the connection. So it's a two sign-on step from CropX to John Deere, and it'll create that connection.
And you would do that at the grower level, right?
Correct. You want to do that at the grower level. Now, having said that, it brings up a good point. If you do connect it with if you have I don't know what the right term is, a dealer account in John Deere Operations Center, again, they have a specific term for that. When it does come in and connect your account to CropX, if you're connected to your dealer account in Operations Center, it's going to ask you what grower accounts you do want to sync with this account. So then you can select specific grower accounts, even if you did use your dealer account in Operations Center. But having said that, you're probably talking about CropX grower account.
Right, on the
Correct.
CropX side. Yeah.
For any of you new or unfamiliar with Operations Center, when you go in here to set up, the second tab on the right, you can go to Connections, and it's going to open up a full page of connections. Again, they probably have, I don't know, 50 connections now, but you'll see CropX listed as one of the connections. And if you had that green check mark down there at the bottom of that individual tab, you'll see that it's successfully connected. From there, there's nothing more to do. It will just automatically start syncing the data over into CropX. This is live.
I think that would be set up in web, the partner connections. Yep.
Correct. Good point. Now,
Isn't there some sort of like choose the fields you want interface? Is that right, guys?
Correct. There is. And that's what I was talking about, a dealer account in John Deere, if you signed in with your dealer account. But you're right. You could even select, again, which fields if you want to go individual fields or if you want to select the whole farm to import from John Deere. So you can get very specific if you only wanted to look at a couple fields or the whole farm. I threw this up there just because that connection is a two-way sync. You heard Travis Center talk a little bit earlier, but even looking at a screenshot that he posted this summer, once that connection is established, we're obviously going to bring in the grower farm field information and the field boundaries along with all of that machine data, planting, harvest, application, basically all as applied. But then going over in the operations center from the CropX account, we will start sending over the pin locations of your soil moisture probes and have the soil moisture status indicated on a daily basis with those pins. So that's another nice feature. Again, some growers who may really like Operations Center or may be using that application more frequently, it'll show them the CropX soil moisture status right within the Operations Center.
And I think if you click on that pin, does it pull up the moisture status bar? Or am I wrong?
I think it just says the status, but then it has a link to go directly to the CropX field details with the automatic sign on. Yeah. Now, again, Gates kind of covered this. We can manually import all other file types, whether it's other as applied from any other manufacturer, or you'll see a list of file types here. Someone asked about drone earlier, can bring in drone data. But where this is also useful is if you have any other management zones, and we'll get into variable rate application here shortly. But if you have management zones already established in another software program, you can easily import them into CropX now. And where that is helpful and where I found a lot of use for that, aside from, again, variable rate, which we're going to touch on, but is just assisting in probe locates. You know, if you've already got established zones and you want to help with the majority soil type or match up any other applications and place specific probes in a specific zone, you can easily import them in here. And very standard, like any other web-based software, you just have to have those files zipped up, and then you just drag and drop those zipped files into the box here, and it uploads very quickly. Any questions with that, the upload process or the kind of the machine data sync?
Is there anything that you guys have come across that wouldn't come into John Deere that we can do? And I guess where I'm going with that is, like, with one of my customers, there's stuff that they still haven't been able to figure out how to get into field view that we can do now. And so I think that helps position it even as just a viewing platform. For example, soil sample data, you were talking about the points and it interpolating those values and creating the raster image. Is there other things that would, so that applies to field view. Is there anything that else applies to John Deere that they can't ingest that we can?
That's a good question. I don't know. You're exactly right. In the climate field view, they don't import the soil test data, soil sample and test data very well,
Or EC.
or not at all. But yes, we can do all of that. There hasn't been any as applied or any kind of shapefile type data that we haven't been able to bring in. Yeah, we've tried to come up with anything we could think of. The DAT or the other method that I've used is, like, if you want management zones. Yep.
I was just sitting here thinking about the exact same thing, and I saw his single sign-on to Field View in Ops Center. I think I would create an Ops Center account that syncs the data from Field View and then have it sync from Ops Center to CropX. Well, sounds a lot easier than exporting hundreds of fields. Maybe.
Well,
I
and
don't
your
know. We'll see.
DAT file made me wonder because I know that I don't think that's listed here. Is why I stumbled, but I'm pretty sure we tested DAT files because climate's not the only one
That's
that
precision planting,
uses.
right?
Yeah. It uses DAT files, but we'll double check them. Good point, good question. Had a couple in the front. That is a good question. We are working on that establishment right now to specify what date range you want, so you don't go too far back and clog up the season.
I'm not familiar with John Deere platform, but I have dealers that are John Deere. Can I do this testing with them? Is it something, I'm from Mexico, can we do that there or?
Absolutely. Yep. Basically, any tractor that's sold today, John Deere wise, and for the last, I don't know how many years, it goes back a ways, is sold with wireless data transfer. And so they have all of those tractors syncing data into Operations Center. Many growers may not even be utilizing it, but it is happening. So if they have that, all they have to do is connect with their dealer to set up their account, and it will automatically be there. And then from there, you can sync the two accounts. Good question. Snorri. We haven't yet, but we can look at that. I mean, that's a good point.
Yeah, for the folks out, that was a question about
Yeah, so-
field analytics integration.
And so that's a good point, whether it's Field Analytics or any other partner connections you guys are interested in, just contact support and we can start looking at those options. Kind of like the hardware and connecting to the gateway. We just need the spec sheets and see what, if they're open to it. Okay, machine data uses, why do we want to get connected? I gave the example this morning, I think it's really valuable to have that machine data when you're going out to do probe locates. Even if you have your probe location established for multiple years, you can pull up previous yield maps or potentially the current planting map and make sure you're in the correct variety, for example, or maybe you're not falling in between, the split rows between two different varieties, whatever it may be. It just may help you assist during those probe locates. The other one is the VRA. We're going to talk to the VRI. We're going to jump into next. And then, like we even talked about earlier with the imagery, you can use that machine data and overlay that with imagery in season to do any crop health checks or better understand why maybe that soil moisture isn't performing like you expect it to. Lastly, I have on there crop recording. We haven't touched on this a whole lot yet today, but we have developed a crop recording module also. This came from the .com feature. One reason we haven't talked about it today is because it's a manual crop recording. It's a tool you can use to record applications in the field just manually instead of pen and paper. If anybody does, trying to get them moved over. What we found here in the US, few people are interested in that, mainly because they're relying solely on their machine data now, because these monitors pretty much take care of recording everything. But number one, that crop recording module is available if anybody is interested. But more importantly, number two, the second part to that we're starting development now is the reporting feature. So once this machine data does come in, we will start to summarize that data and start to be able to report on it. So if you envision that table view that we have for soil moisture status that we talked about with John Gates and Nick Stoll, talked about how much he uses that, there'll be another table view for all of your activity coming from machine data. So just a very simple way to summarize and report everything that's happening from an application standpoint. So the next thing we're going to jump into is variable rate application. Again, we try to make this as simple and as seamless as we possibly could with really basically a 3-step process. And the first one is going to be generating your management zones. And so we have 3 options to do that. You can generate it from really 2 options. We can generate it from 2 different satellite options. You can see productivity and satellite up here. We'll start with machine data. In this example, I just selected a yield map. And once you select machine data, then you're going to have the option to select from any of the available data layers that were imported through John Deere Operations Center. And then as you can see, you can select the number of zones you want. And from there, it just automatically zones that spatial data, the spatial machine data, into management zones. And it goes very quickly, transfers into management zones. Good question. So this tool, variable rate application, not even talking about water yet. This is a new tool that could be used for seeding, fertilizer, any other applications. And then I will lead into water. How do we utilize it for water? But right now, it's just a new tool for any type of variable rate application using management zones.
Yep.
Yes, we can export it, and I'll show you there. That's step number 3.
Yeah, this is a way to set those zones. What you do with them after that, that's where he goes next.
Yep, exactly. So the next screen is just giving another example of establishing those zones using satellite imagery. You'll see I have satellite circled. Now you'll see another option there called productivity. All that is another imagery indice, and we're actually going to remove that tab because I think it's confusing. All it is another satellite. We'll have that as an option under satellite. But when you choose satellite, then again, you have the option to select what image date. And just like we showed in some of those examples before, when you hit that drop down, it'll show you the image and the date to select from. And then you can choose them and play with your scale and number of zones from there. Yes. Good question. So the question is, can we just use one data layer today, or can we use multiple data layers? Today it is one data layer, but we are actually working on being able to select multiple data layers. So again, multiple layers could be 2 or 3 years of yield data. It could be multiple satellite images, and it's going to create an average management zone. That's actually in the works as we speak also. So again, that step is very quick. Once you do that, then it just brings you into establishing your product rates. It's going to divide those zones, and you can, again, go in there and manually enter your rates. No deep science behind any of this. Again, it's just a simple and quick way to, again, generate, whether it's planting maps or fertilizer maps, for example. The one nice thing about this is you can see in this example, you have a strategy, which is just kind of a little helpful tool where you can select ascending or descending. And what that does then is if you select a base rate, what you want your average rate to be, again, whether that's pounds of fertilizer or seeds per acre, you enter in that base rate and it will automatically distribute the rest of the rates in all the other zones based on what strategy I've picked between ascending or descending. Just kind of another, it's a quick tool to help establish rates in all of the other zones, but you can manually override them and get more customized if needed. Not today, but we are coming with more editing tools such as that. So the question was, can we insert pivot corners? And not today, but the best way, because I was playing with that, the best way I found to do that is select an image where those pivot corners are basically, yeah, dry land anyway, and it cuts them out. But we are coming with more editing tools such as merge and split zones and a circle tool for pivot corners.
That would be the split feature he was talking about, splitting, yeah, taking one zone with multiple polygons and exploding them to
Yeah.
then merge the other ones back together.
You,
which
and you
would be-
can do it today. It's actually, we have a drawing tool. After you can edit it, and basically it's a paint by numbers tool where you could go in there and paint that one zone. I wasn't gonna dive into that until all the other editing features with split and merge zones was available, but there, if you wanted to do it today, you could with that paint by numbers tool. Any other questions? And again, it's really easy as that. Third step, go ahead, Nick.
I was just gonna say, can't you put an underlying separate layer? No?
You just have your base layer of opacity. You can just look at the underground, this regular satellite imagery.
Yeah, well, okay, whatever your original layer was then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And going to one of the questions that was over here earlier, then this is how you export. You can either download a file, which will be a shape file, or select the specific controller, and it will export in that format. So for example, if you select John Deere right here, it's going to export an RX folder with that shape file. So it's already in the right format that you just dump on the SD card or the thumb drive and dump in. But what, I don't know, Dimmery mentioned that yesterday. What we are testing next week, and it should be released in the next week or two, is the automatic wireless data transfer to the machine. So with John Deere now with this connection, you'll be able to select John Deere and automatically wireless this prescription to the machine directly from here.
I'm assuming the way that works is like you're essentially syncing it to Ops Center and then it pushes it to the device.
Correct. You can do it as dealers and go to their, select their grower and, yep. So I think the next slide, if I remember, yes. The other nice feature then was you automatically save those management zones. So here on the left is just a list of management zones. Then you can quickly start, with one of those management zones in the future. If you want to reuse it again each year for a seeding prescription or revise it or edit it from there. Everything is saved there for each field, right where you can quickly access it. Yep, in that step one, right where we select our layer, the bottom option is number of zones you want. And again, then it generates those zones like 5 seconds. Every field is different. So I've got a combination. So personally, I've got my whole farm EC mapped. So I rely on EC data quite a bit. So in that example, I'll bring EC data in through the machine data import and start with those management zones is typically where I'm starting. Smoothing to take out like small polygons. Yeah, that's a good, I was calling it merge, but it could be, yep. Smoothing.
Well, or maybe there's even a threshold that we should just make sure and put in there that, it cuts out
Yeah.
polygons under X
Minimum size.
minimum size.
Any other questions with VRA? Yep. Great question. We don't have that yet, but Taha's taking it out. A batch zone maker and go through and. Any other yep.
I think that's what that left option would be, the download file option. Right?
That one actually is to download to your thumb drive.
Right. Yeah, he's just saying, how do you get just a plain shape? file?
Yeah, he's saying like on the left, rather even, I mean, Trimble will be a shapefile, but we could, yes, add just
Oh,
shapefile.
yeah, I get what you're saying. Like it's confusing. Like I should just be able to select
Shapefile.
shape file.
Yeah. Good suggestion. All right, keep moving. All right. So the next one is the kind of the upgraded VRI features and tools. And this is going to work in conjunction with what we just showed you on the variable rate application tool itself. So starting right from the beginning, you know, you have your list of saved management zones. You can see I even have saved prescription maps now. So if you do generate a VRI prescription, it's going to save that zone layer, which has been a, a much wanted feature for a long time. But you're going to start with the same process. You're going to start with management zones. Again, now you have the flexibility to do a VRI map, not only from soil type, which was our limitation with the CropX platform so far, but you could use machine data, satellite, or anything. I'm really excited about this because obviously satellite, if you had a grower that was really interested in doing VRI, you could be using an updated image every week if you wanted and adjusting that variable rate application by new images. The other concept is, or you can now have the ability to more easily bring in stored EC zones, Veris zones, whatever it might be, or again, machine data and use yield data if those were the right zones you want to start watering based upon. So you establish your zones. And then the next step is really, it's gonna, you're gonna set your rate for each of the zones. No different, you're gonna set your watering rate. But then from setting your watering rate for each zone, it's gonna convert that into pie slices. So, and if you remember how it used to work, it'll take the majority zone into that pie slice and use that rate for that individual pie slice. The pie slices, you can select your sector size, just like we've always had. I think it goes down to 2. You remember what it currently is? But I don't know.
Today, I think it's 2.
Yeah, I think it goes down to 2. So again, it automatically split those zones up. But the big thing there is, even going back to the crop metrics days, we were somewhat limited on what data types we could generate that VRI from. Now we're really unlimited based on any type of data set you want to bring in and generate this VRI from. From there, I'm just kind of focused on this one screen. We've had some missing requests or requests that we have been missing from the old crop metrics platform that we have added here now. You'll see the wiper scripts, which are made for half pivots or any type of wiper pivots. It will generate a custom prescription to speed in and out of the corners. And you can choose which direction that wiper is going to select or to generate 2 individual prescriptions for each direction if needed. But then down there on the table, 2 other nice things that have been added and been missing is the locking feature and the selection tool. And why this has been nice is because it gives the user a lot of flexibility to go in and customize rates for each zone. So for any of you new to the VRI or maybe not have been accustomed to the crop metrics platform that was been able to do this, it really lets you go in and say you have it starts with your designated rates for each slice based on your underlying data layer. But then you might want to tweak and hone in on specific slices throughout that entire pivot. This really gives you the capability to customize that by locking certain features you don't want to alter and adjusting all other slices, whether that's adjusting them up or down, or going in and manually editing slices one by one.
So you would be able to lock and then go back, adjust your base, and then go forward again to this screen.
Correct. Yep, and just like we did in the next one, the last step is download the file. And then the grower can upload that directly to their, whether it's their Rain Cloud, AgSense, FieldWise, whatever their telemetry controller is. Specific information such as.
So that would be in the irrigation settings. So hopefully you've already got that set up at this point.
Good question. So the question is there a place to enter in your pivot settings such as percent timer, speed and all of that? And that is the number one step in VRI is you have to have your pivot set up with that information in the pivot settings before we move into this VRI aspect. Yep. Good question though.
You would reduce your sector size down to the minimum that you would need to address whatever you're fixing.
So yeah, two things with that though. And just going back to maybe the basic VRI understanding. One, regardless of your sector size, which you can go down to 2 degrees, you can make those slices as thin as you want or as big as you want. The way the program works is when it goes to a sector, if you look at this zone map now, and when you get to a sector, there's going to be a lot of different zones in each sector potentially. It's going to take the majority zone or the zone with the most acres and use that rate designated for that slice. And we've just found that to be the most consistent water based on the majority zone in each individual slice. Let's talk about that after, because, and the reason being, so the question is with the Ranky controller specifically, which works a little bit differently than a FieldWise. Your guys' file format is different than what it is for AgSense. So the Ranky controller is still going to work the same way it always has with VRI. I mean, that's the way we first developed for you guys way back in our initial years with crop metrics, but it is a different format that gets sent to Ranky because of that. It will, yes. We will have it set up. We will have a Ranky download to go to your specific format. When you get more than one pivot with nozzle control, we'll talk. When you get more than one, I knew how many you had. Roxy. We have to download and then log in manually and upload that file. And that's because of the changes with both of those companies over the years, being with Valley, AgSense, and now Lindsay with FieldWise. They don't provide us with those APIs any longer for the direct upload. So it's more of a manual process. We're hopefully Ranky will be a direct upload here soon. Yes. And I'm
Well,
pretty
maybe the
sure,
question is like, do you save does this prescription save?
yeah, the prescription
editing.
saves. And then you can go in down here at the bottom, your VRI prescription, you could go in and edit that prescription map to bump it up 10% or. No, you should be able to adjust the amplification factor, like. Or adjust your base rate, you know, whichever way. There's multiple ways to do it. Yeah. Any other questions with VRI? So the question is there any cheat sheets to generate a VRI prescription on terrain and different terrain features? There's not a one size fits all with terrain. So no, I mean, it's really trial and error. Obviously, every field is going to be different based on what we always call the landscape position, number one, but then also the severity of the slope too. And it's going to be a custom, like I said, trial and error, playing with the rates until you get it honed down on each field.
Yeah, and I think part of what you're asking is like what the maximum rate is I can apply without running off. Yeah, I mean, as lammers would all tell us, I mean, fields are very different, and I think we see that with our sensors. So it's, yeah, you probably can't apply a rule that fits everything.
And Lammers also just made a very good point, you know, with some of that, your best point of knowledge is the grower experience. They probably knows where it's running off and how much. And so they kind of already have a rate tweaked or know what they should be doing, that you could at least help make an automated prescription for them instead of them trying to do it manually.
That's a large question. With Chrometric software, we have but probably back 35%. 50.
Yeah, 50%. The other thing, you know, that these guys are doing, and I don't want to steal the thunder from the other company they're working with, but they're also having a lot of success with variable rate fertigation. And that's the other potential opportunity I see with this. It'd be more of a manual process than what these guys are doing over there with Sentinel. But now with this capability, you could very easily establish your management zones that you need to apply nitrogen on. If you want to do variable rate nitrogen in season, you don't have to do a flat rate with that pivot. You could establish your management zones, whether it's based on a yield goal. What I've done the last few years is you can go out and tissue sample by zone, find out what your recommended rate is based on tissue and soil samples, and adjust the zones from there. But obviously you can start to move into a variable rate fertigation as well also. No, and that's what Tanner was asking over here, nozzle control or zone control. And I said, we just haven't seen the number of pivots. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Help.cropx.com. You ever been there, Ryan?
Well, and it's a great point. So to Stoll's point, there's tons of videos and documentation on the help site. What I would recommend is start by just searching anything you want. And if you don't find it, then reach out to support. Because like VRI, for example, we've probably got hundreds of videos from the CropMetrics days, and not all of them may not be uploaded to the CropX support site, but a lot of them are good educational on how to get started with VRI, regardless of what software you're using, just the basic agronomy behind it. So we definitely have those videos, and everything's web-based or uploaded somewhere that we can share with you if you can find it searching.
Yeah, and to your point though, Ryan, I guess maybe what you're looking for is something maybe more formal, which would generally be what's called an LMS, a learning management system. That's a hard thing. When you get to that level of a resource, it requires a lot of resources internally to produce something that's worth you spending your time on. And so we've kind of migrated between several different knowledge-based platforms. We feel good about where we are now, and we have that in a pretty good state currently. So, is an LMS in the support team's future? I don't know. But in general, in the industry, I will say that those things are usually one of the things that sound like a good idea, but implementation is the tough part. Like adoption on both the customer side and producing the content on the internal side. Like that's the challenge. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tanner.
Good question. Anything else on VRI? Or like I said at the beginning, we can open it up to any questions you guys might have with the software platform in general or anything in depth. Ryan? I'm glad you brought that up because so he brings up a very good point. Agronomically, is it better to put on more water on the sands or less water on sandy soils? And I'm glad you brought that up because that is one aspect that we didn't talk about with the new VRI that I needed to, or the updated VRI. So the old way, or the CropMetrics method or algorithm, was based on putting on less water on heavier soil types, more water on lighter soil types. But knowing, again, going back to some of the training videos, Lammers and I would always preach, that doesn't mean you can dump on 3 inches of water on a sandy soil. That's got to be customized field by field to kind of figure out that right amount. Now, why I bring that up on the algorithm is because the CropX method of doing VRI does the exact opposite. It's going to put on less water on the heavier soil types, less water on the lighter soil types, more water on the heavier soil types, because those heavier soil types, in theory, is what has more water holding capacity. The challenge with that in most irrigated solutions is when you're irrigating, you're filling up that heavier profile enough that if you keep watering it, you're typically going to overwater. And if you remember that imagery slide that I showed earlier today on that, how we got started way back in the day, it was doing just that. It was watering too frequently, was overwatering those heavier soils. And I think Lammers would agree with me, starting even back with the probes, when Lammers started with the probes, the first and foremost thing that we always found was growers overwater, and those soils are oversaturated. In fact, I've been thinking about a lot lately too, and I think I might have mentioned this last year, but who listens to the Hefty podcast? Probably a lot, whether it's RFD TV or may listen to their podcast. It's probably the largest ag podcast in the world, really. But the number one thing they've talked about the last 10 years, the number one factor that affects yield is water. And what they're a big proponent of is drainage. And they'll always preach drainage, drainage, drainage to get rid of that water that's oversaturating those soils. But that's all they've ever talked about. And, and they're in a different part of the country that drainage is more of a factor than it is in, irrigated country like that. But why I bring that up is knowing that water is affecting yield first and foremost. What I found is interesting, just within the last 5 or 6 months, because they started using moisture probes last year, they have been talking a lot and will refer to it very frequently about how overwatering is affecting their root growth and is causing that saturation where they don't have any oxygen in the soil. It's the first time they've ever talked about oxygen in the soil. Well, again, our number one guy that's been preaching that from the very beginning days, that was the whole premises behind irrigation scheduling is, maximizing that root development and oxygen in the soil to further our plant health and our plant development throughout the season to maximize our irrigation efficiency. So in a long-winded answer, coming back, is there a right or a wrong way of doing it? No. Some fields you may put on less water on those heavier soil types. And in a dry year, you may put on more water in those heavier soil types. But it also brings up another good example that, again, I'm going to use Lammers. Lammers and I have had a lot of success with is on those lighter soil types, because they don't have the water holding capacity. One thing we've done, and the controllers are capable of doing this, but is we do an infield wiper prescription. And we often called it a triple wiper prescription. And what this does, and like on one of my toughest fields, this is the prescription I run and have the most success with. But when you get to the sandy zones, it will cut back to a 1/2 inch, for example. It'll go forward at a 1/2 inch. The controller's programmed to stop at the zone, come back at a 1/2 inch, and then go back and forward a 1/2 inch and finishing that prescription. And what that does is you're applying lower amounts at a higher frequency that soil and that plant can start to utilize more efficiently rather than trying to dump 1.5 inches all at once. It's just hitting it more frequently at lower rates. Well, from here, you develop the prescription and it would just be a 1/2 inch. And then like in FieldWise or AgSense, and I'm sure RainCloud, you can set up the controller to stop, go forward and reverse at those designated sector degrees. And it will do it automatically that you don't even have to worry about. And in fact, like those sandy zones, if you have the rest of the field that's good on irrigation and your probe might says your status is good, but those sandy zones are burning up, I've ran prescriptions just to hit those sandy zones and do just that. I mean, at whatever rate you need to hit it basically 3 times at a lower rate. Yep. So for example, your probe, the majority of your field might be a heavier soil type, and that says that probe doesn't need irrigation. But now with VRI, if you got a sandy zone that is burning up sooner than later, you don't want to water the whole field because of that minimal acre zone is burning up, but you can go across that and just hit it with VRI. And again, with those sandy zones, that triple wiper works great because you're not going to dump all of it. That's just going to be flushed through the soil, but you're hitting it with low rates multiple times.
And that could be applicable at the end of the season when you're trying to utilize the rest of the moisture in the heavier soil types, but you don't have enough in the rest.
Great point. Did everybody hear them? So we were just talking about those different zones. They've still got customers that are using multiple probes in the field to really fine tune those rates and how much water they need in each one of those zones. You know, whether it's 3 zones or 3 probes in the field, or I know one thing we've commonly found, you know, you might have just that extreme zone where you might have the majority might be a good silty loam, but whether it's a really heavier soil on one side or a really lighter soil, 2 zones will really pay for itself to really fine tune that and know, you know when to hit it. And to
Yeah.
Stoll's point, you know, we've been talking about a lot by the lighter soils, but it goes the same way with those really heavier soils in those certain zones. When you go to finish out that crop, especially with these high yield corn anymore, we're really pushing these corn yields more and more that it seems like we're getting later and later on watering because of the potential they have. But some of those heavier soils don't need to be getting hit the closer and closer we're getting to harvest.
And maybe we should be careful about when we say, we should probably say high available water soils versus heavy soils, because at least where I'm at, you might, according to an EC map, it would say it's a heavier soil, but it's eroded and its available water is actually less than it would be in the siltier lower ground.
Good
So,
point.
Yeah. But yeah, to his point, like it just depends on the field. Like as I was just sitting here thinking, I'm like, I have 3 perfect examples. They all have 2 probes in the field. Three different fields, all have 2 probes. The one, I'm putting less water in, we'll say the bad ground, right? It's kind of like a lower area. The second example, I'm honestly kind of trying to convince the person that we should really be utilizing the second probe somewhere else, because it's been there for years and we really don't, I don't think we really need to water any differently. It's sandier soil, but it's a lot poorer soil. So its water use is actually lower than the siltier ground on the flatter bottom. And then on the other end of the spectrum, then I have a place where the sandier soil does use more water and I apply more water to it. So it just kind of depends. You kind of learn that after deploying those sensors there and watching them over a whole season.
Well, it's a great point, and I'll go back to some history and one thing we learned also with that. So the question is, you know, when you start doing VRI, you got to be careful that you're not hurting one area of the field because the probe is telling you something else where it's located in its specific management zone. And this really varies from year to year. But I will tell you, kind of again, going back to experience, the VRI is typically going to work best for you early in the year, at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year. And one reason why is because in the heat of the season, especially around reproductive season, that entire field is pulling so much water that you're typically going to be irrigating based on water replacement to fill during that reproductive stage. And you don't want to get carried away chasing VRI too much during that reproductive stage, because you could be putting on not enough water for what the plant is actually using, kind of going back to the whole ET idea, letting us know how much. So typically during that reproductive stage, you're better off even doing a flat rate to make sure you're providing what that crop is using throughout the week, knowing that on average, a lot of pivots, you know, whether it's an inch, inch and a quarter, inch and a half, they're using that by the next time they can come around. So good point. Jonathan. So is there going to be any comparison tool to compare your script with yield or your other layers? That is on the list. We don't have a development date, but yes, that's one of my favorite things that I'm most excited about. So,
Analytics, that's really the end
Yes.
game. I mean, I think that's a good picture to paint is like, we know where the industry really needs to go. And I think you can see the automation that we've brought to other parts of the platform. Just imagine what we could do here.
and one thing we're close. I mean, speaking on that idea, Gates and I was going to call it how much crop per drop. Well, we'll coin it, but it's also part to do it right. We're trying to get the right connection to get the as applied water data back, to use that data in analysis with the actual yield data. I mean, you can use your script and get an estimate, but we're working on with the Ranky, trying to get that as applied data, and then we would have an actual crop per drop. All right, Naomi's kicking us out. Russ Monner, get one. What's that? You know that spray advisor we showed? That's what I got to watch daily to make sure he's not going out when he shouldn't be. All right, thank you.